Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about The Ambassadors of Death, written by David Whittaker in his last script for the series, which he considers his least favourite, but there you go, and directed by Michael Ferguson, who also did The War Machines and The Seeds of Death previously. Now before, many years ago, I considered this one of my favourite Doctor Who stories. I used to absolutely love this story. It used to be one which I used to watch over and over and over again. And yeah, I have a huge fond memories with this. So please be aware that I might be a bit biased in this story's favour. But a lot of people have the opinion that this story is great. It has great moments, it has great story, it has great elements. But it does kind of drag and is a bit slow, and it repeats itself to try and stall to the ending, as this 7-part adventure could have easily been a 5 or even a 4-part adventure. I don't like agreeing with the majority of people that most classic Who stories need to be cut down to a few less episodes. I think that sometimes what people consider padding is moments of building atmosphere and tension and get to learn the characters and stuff. And, you know, I don't agree with that majority. But here, I do kind of see why. I personally wouldn't have this story any other way. Like I said, it used to be one of my favourite Doctor Who stories. I don't think I would put it in my top 10 these days, but when I was younger, it was definitely up in my top 3 at least. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The story revolves around astronauts going to Mars, and there's a ship that's been gone to Mars, and all communication from it has just stopped. They want to answer the thing, so they send to the scientific division people send another ship to try and get in contact with them, and that's where our story starts. And whilst this is happening, the Doctor's watching it off a TV, and we get a nice cool moment dealing with time at the start of the story, which I find really funny, because you think they set that up for possibly something to do with the story, but it doesn't actually turn out anything. It's just a fun little gag at the start of the story in which the Doctor and Liz Shaw gets spun around in time for a little bit, where she goes at a few seconds in the future, and then the Doctor goes and follows her, but then she's arrived, and then she can't find the Doctor, and then the Doctor arrives, and bing bang boom. I love this scene. It's one of those iconic little Doctor companion moments in which the Doctor trying to explain time travel to her, and it really works well. But like I said, it has nothing really to do with the story. But the Doctor gets involved in the story by watching the TV. This astronaut's journey is being transmitted onto national television. And whilst this is happening, when the astronaut goes into the other ship, they hear a noise, and then he stops communication as well. And this noise gets heard out throughout on everyone's TV, and the Doctor recognises it. So he and Liz go to the space place and work out what that sound is, and find out it's a message, and they learned that there's been another organisation on Earth that's been communicating with these aliens. There's a lot of emphasis on espionage in these first couple of episodes, and I really enjoy it here. It feels very, I've probably said this in the 3rd time in a row, this story feels like a James Bond-ness story, and it really emphasises here with the more military going on in these organisations. And there's even a bit where somebody mentions taking down like all the gold in the place. I have completely lost my thoughts, sorry about that. But anyway, I digress. So we get this story about these astronauts and stuff, and when they get taken down when the ship lands onto Earth, the ship lands, but they still can't communicate to anybody, and they take it to the base, and they get attacked by helicopters and these bombs and these two guys who steal the ship, and it works very well, and there's a lot of great atmosphere, there's great tension, there's a great a lot that's going on in this story. And there's especially, as well, as at one point the Doctor asks for a machine to work on the computer, and he gets permission, but when he goes to the computer he's held at gunpoint, which is our first cliffhanger of the series, of this story I mean. I don't think any of the Jon Pertwee cliffhangers so far have been particularly memorable, which I haven't mentioned in my last two previous stories. They're not particularly bad, but they're nothing that will get you at the edge of your seat. They kind of flashed so quick. But this story does something really unique when it does the catch up. When you play the scene, the last episode, at the start of the next episode. Usually in Doctor Who so far, you have the title sequence, the name of the title of the episode, the writer, and then the part, and then you get the episode. Here what they did was they got the title, so the Doctor Who comes up, then the scene plays from the previous episode, and then when the cliffhanger bit happens, then you get the title, and it's really cool how it like zooms up on the ambassador moment, and then it's like a ping noise, and then you get of death, and it's a really cool moment. Michael Ferguson does a fantastic job with this directing. It isn't very well represented on the DVD, as the only surviving clips we got are really poorly kept video footage that makes everything have like a rainbowish filter on it, and some people's skins turn grey, and the walls behind people turn red and bluish near the skin. You'll know if you've seen analog television. It's very poorly kept, and yeah, it might bug a lot of people down. And I think a lot of reasons why this story has got such a low reappraisal is because of the picture quality. Maybe, I don't know. Not to say that people don't have genuinely good points to make about the story. I think the first half of the story, with the whole espionage and all this about the astronauts, fantastic, and you really get engaged. And for the first 3 or 4 episodes, you're really into the story. However, when we get to part 5, or I think it's 5 or 4, and we learn a lot more about what these villains are trying to do and how they're using the aliens. Turns out that the astronauts in there aren't actually astronauts, they're aliens, and the real astronauts are kept still in space. And the story does kind of slowly start to drag at this point, because there's not really much in terms of theming or dramatic tension, though we do get another great diplomacy story here, as the Doctor trying to communicate with these aliens, and so he gets sent up to space, and then it turns out that these 3 aliens are actually ambassadors that a group of humans have called upon to make contact with them, only to then kidnap them. So we do have some great moments still, but you can clearly see that the story does has to kind of pull its own weight at this point. It does kind of slowly lose its momentum. That's a great way of putting it. by episode 5, you'd start kind of going, right, we know what's going on, we know the stakes and stuff, so now can we get into the story? But there's constantly sabotaging to try to delay the plot. But not to say that it's not all bad. I really like one of the villains, Reagan. He's kind of this sarcastic prick. That's the best way of putting it. I don't know why. This is one of the reasons why I really love this story. Reagan is a fantastic villain. He's a henchman. He's not the main villain, though he does kind of have his own plans for the aliens. But the way he's just smug about everything and how he talks to Liz Shaw and the scientist he's kept prisoner there, it's something about it that I just can't help but love. It's something about him, and it's great to see that during the second half of the story he gets a lot of screen time. I think he might even get more screen time than the Doctor at this point in the story, so that's pretty cool. However, the actual main villain, this general guy, he is kind of a bit dull. His premise is great. The actor is fantastic, and his motivations about how he's like basically paranoid, and so he thinks he should destroy all aliens. You do see it all flesh out, but it's a bit too little too late, and you're not really that invested in him because all of his other stuff, and like you got Reagan as well, who's much better villain, and you should have just made him the main villain, though that might tarnish a bit the way I personally like Reagan. And yeah, I'm kind of struggling to say about the story, which, you know, I'm not very good at explaining some of the stories that I just absolutely love, which I've learned doing these Doctor Who marathon videos. So I do apologise. Yeah, there's nothing really I can talk about. Benton just randomly appears in part 5, whose last appearance was in The Invasion, and the story kind of treats like he was always there. So that's pretty amusing. And there you go, that's the Ambassadors of Death. Sorry, this one's not really that detailed. Not that I don't want to give the impression it's a bad story. It is a great story, but the second half of it does kind of drag. Though it does have some great moments, like I said, with Reagan and the villains, the actual aliens themselves. When you see them just murdering a bunch of people, which they can kill by their touch. Fantastic scenes, and there's one great cliffhanger in it. Actually, it might be the first great cliffhanger of the Third Doctor era, in which the Doctor finds somebody's body in an office dead, and one of the aliens is behind the door, and he comes up behind the Doctor and he puts his arm in top of him like that, and then a cliffhanger. So that's something about this story. But mainly I like this story mainly because I've probably watched it too many times. So if you're taking my videos as recommendations, maybe skip this one. I'm not too sure. I mean, talking about it like now in this video makes me feel like my nostalgia for this story is holding this story in praise. So, you know, if you want to see what I personally like in my Doctor Who stories, watch The Ambassadors of Death. If you want somebody to recommend you a bunch of stories, maybe give this one a skip. I personally prefer it to the Silurians, the previous story, but, you know, it's still a pretty good story. There you go, I'm struggling to say much about it, so I'm just going to end it now. So join me next time where we have our first story in an alternative universe. Things get pretty heated up in Inferno. So I'll see you then next time on the Doctor Who Marathon.